If you want to be more effective in your work and in your life, and you'd like to have more confidence that you're meeting your intentions, this is where it begins. Welcome to Do Busy Right, helping you organize your information and manage your attention so that they work for you, not against you. We educate you and encourage you by discussing ways to be more effective, not more exhausted. Let's do busy right. This episode is inspired by a somewhat recent post by Cal Newport, who I admire deeply. I can't say I agree with him 100%, but it's pretty close, and I think, everything he's written. He wrote this post about career management, and he's very insightful about what that might require and whether or not people really have the skills and the knowledge to do career management. And in his post, he has suggestions on gaining both. And I think he also hosts a workshop on how to do career management. Well, that got me thinking, because what I talk about here and my core is really, I'll use the term work management, and that is task and attention management. And as I was thinking about it, I came up with 4 areas of work knowledge, and I wanted you to know about them so you can better manage your own work and your own career. One of them is the career management that Cal talks about. For background, a couple of things are going on right now and really have been for a while. A couple of trends that can give us new opportunities to improve our lives through improving our career trajectory, through improving our work trajectory. And that's what I'm all about here on the podcast and in my work. I know you have a job and I know you need to pay bills. My concern is largely putting you in a position where you can do that better and easier with less stress and more results. To some degree, this is what Cal's talking about. He wants you to have a successful career. So he talks about how you intentionally have a successful career. He talks about what you should be thinking about, what should you be doing that gives you odds that are better than random chance to be successful in your career. We'll start by talking about the 4 areas of work knowledge. So it's arranged in different ways. There's 2 areas that everybody knows about. There's the one that Cal talks about that I mentioned before, and then there's the one that I talk about that I also mentioned before. So I'll organize these 4 components or 4 areas so that you can make sure that you're up to snuff, that you have a better career, that you have better work days, have better work weeks, and that all these are as good as you can make them. From that position of doing better with less stress, that's greater productivity, and it should allow you to outcompete other people that are doing a similar job. And if nothing else, then it'll put you in a position where you've got some actions you can take and some experiments you can put in place so that you're not just sitting there hoping for that next promotion or just hoping that that next job change puts you in a different salary class. Instead, you'll actually have some things that you can do to position yourself for that. We'll start with the 2 areas of work thinking or career thinking that I believe everybody more or less already knows about. And then we'll work over into Cal's newish area and then my area that many people don't seem to know much about. So the first 2 areas are basic skills of work, what I call work skills, and then what I call career skills. So if you talk about work skills, you've got to have these skills, these basic skills of work. You know how to use a computer, you know how to use a phone, you know how to talk to people, you're not lazy, you're willing to be where you need to be when you need to be there. You're willing to put forth some effort. You understand roughly how a computer or a laptop works. You've learned some of the entry-level tactical skills of doing a job. For example, you can type. I've added learning new software tools into this category. So you know something about how to do Excel, you know something about how to do Word documents, you know something about how to use a printer, you know something about how to send and receive emails, and you know something about what the proper tone of those emails should be. For me, these things are the basic level of work skills. They might be referred to from time to time as office skills or workplace skills. These are skills that you probably practiced in school. Maybe you had some project work to do in your university studies that put you in a position to need to do this. Maybe you've done PowerPoint presentations and understand how to put that together, at least at some basic level. And I don't mean that you're perfect at these skills. I just mean that you're able to function in these areas. Perfection or complete knowledge is probably not necessary. I mean, if you learn to use 100% of what Excel can do, you get into some stuff that's pretty rarely useful. These things can be quite valuable under the circumstances where they're needed, but that's, as I said, pretty rare. So Excel will allow you to do really sophisticated statistics, really sophisticated data analysis, really sophisticated planning scenarios. But 9 times out of 10, you just need to crank through some numbers and put together a reasonably logical presentation of those numbers that is easily read. Maybe, I find Excel is easier for kind of multi-step calculations, the ones that are hard to do on a handheld, screen-based, or mobile calculator. So this kind of average skill set is what I'm talking about here. I can find my way around on a computer. I can do some things and make things happen in these various applications. It's this base level of work skill. And there are certainly areas in which you could probably get better, and that might even be useful from time to time. In work skills, the fact that you need to get better and the knowledge that you need to get better is pretty easily identified. And that makes it reasonably easy to correct. So the fact that you can identify a lack of skill and the fact that it's pretty easy to get some tutoring or some help in that skill makes it pretty easy to correct. All you have to do is go to Google and say, how do I build a financial debt amortization table in Excel? And you get a video and you follow the steps. You can remember how to do it over time, and I would call that learning to do it. But failing that, you can always do a Google search and figure out what the steps are. So this is the level of kind of work skill. And you'll hear people talk about this from time to time. A lot of times programs for underemployed folks will teach them this skill set, how to use a computer. I think that some of these are more important than others, however. If you're a knowledge worker, I think there is no satisfactory typing speed. I guess if you can type as fast as other people talk, then that's probably just about good enough. But as much time as we spend touching keyboards in the modern workplace, it's hard to think that, oh, I just typed that too quickly. I just, that was just too fast to get that out of my head and onto a piece of paper. This set of skills, these basic skills together represent one of the 4 areas. And again, I think it's pretty straightforward to both identify a lack of knowledge or skill and to correct it in this area. The second of the 4, and again, this is pretty well known, I would say, is a technical knowledge about your specialty. I call this career skill. This is depth in your specialty, in your career. Some examples. If you're a lawyer, you need to understand the law. If you're a doctor, you need to understand medicine. If you're a CPA, you need to be up to snuff on tax codes. In this area, if you're a member of a professional association or a professional organization, you may need to prove that you're spending time here, and your association will try to get you to do that by requiring CEUs is the typical term, continuing education units, or whatever that means. This is an annual, hey, you need to do X hours of training just to keep up and to maintain your professional certification. That helps us identify areas where we may need to learn more, helps us identify areas in which we might be weak. But it also helps us identify paths to improve, because there are typically training programs for these kinds of tests. And that helps us to figure out what we need to understand in order to improve in career skills. I call this level career skill because it's what gives you your specialty. It's what fits you into being able to do one job in a company versus being able to do another one. These are the skills that distinguish a programmer of really any skill level from an accountant. because you have different knowledge and different ways to make things work. In a lot of cases, this might overlap with work skills. There's basic work skills I think everybody needs to understand at some level. So things, how emails work, when you click send, how do you open emails, all those sorts of things. But career skills are also in there because some careers require heavier use of certain computing tools. If you're a CPA, then your go-to is probably Excel or something like Excel, because you need to make numbers work out and do complex multi-step calculations. And you also need to present the results of those calculations to people. But there's usually also a more specialized set of knowledge. If we talk about this using the CPA as the example, we talked about understanding the tax code. And that's very different from Excel because it's more specialized. Excel, because a lot of people use Excel, engineers, for example, probably use Excel because it's really powerful calculation machine. But while both specialties utilize Excel, they utilize it probably in different ways and utilize different functions. But the ability to learn those packages and learn those applications then fades over into kind of the basic work skills there. Now, if you're deep into engineering or maybe deep into theoretical tax preparation, you might need a more involved calculation machine. So I've delved into that a little bit, and this goes back 10 or 15 years, but at the time it was pretty advanced. It was a system called Wolfram Alpha, and it enabled me to make calculations at kind of a different level, to do calculus on a machine rather than doing it by hand. So, it may even be that your use of computer applications, while typically a basic work skill, fades into this career skill because of the specialized tools that are often available for specific careers. I lump these two categories together because one is they're well known. Everybody knows that in order to get your first specialized job, your first job that's not just retail or manual labor, that you need to have these work skills of being dressed, being able to talk, all these different ideas. And you need to have some sort of qualification for a specialized job, particularly in white collar work, in office kind of work. You need to be able to express some skill level so that the people that are hiring you can categorize you. So that's why these two, I think, are at the same level and pretty easy to discuss and pretty easy to identify where there's gaps and pretty easy to fill those gaps in these two categories. I will say that career skills may hold a trap. And when I talk about this trap, it's a little bit difficult to explain, and I think I've found a way to explain it. Now, I'm not going to die on this hill, and if you disagree with me, that's fine, but I'm going to go ahead and make the case just in case it might be useful for you. Skills within our specialty, these career skills, are sometimes referred to as technical skill. And in some fields, medicine comes to mind. You can get very deep into a specialty, a specific small area of knowledge, and you can be rewarded for that. In medicine, you can spend your entire career understanding the mechanics and physiology of the human eye. Then you become a specialist and you go somewhere where specialists are fairly rare. In those extreme cases where specialist knowledge is needed, you get referrals from more generalist doctors who don't have that knowledge, but they have a patient who needs that specialist knowledge. And so we're in this unusual specialty. But I would suggest that in many fields, as we try to improve our career prospects, maybe we rely too heavily on those kind of arcane details. We do this in part because it's a pretty easy path to travel. It's pretty easy to say, hey, I want to get better at what I do, so I'm going to learn more technical knowledge. And the more you're a specialist in a field, the more you understand that next level of technical knowledge. But it's pretty easy to believe that you're improving your career prospects by deepening your knowledge. And that's because in many fields it works. We talked about medicine. Lawyers will specialize. Some lawyers will become divorce attorneys, for example, and they have a deeper understanding of some of these odd cases. In programming, we call it edge cases in the legal world that have to do with divorce. There are people who have these terribly complicated divorce scenarios, and they'll pay for a specialist to help them understand the legal implication of these scenarios. And I guess in the case of a divorce, how to begin to untangle those complex issues. Most people who unfortunately go through a divorce, it's okay. The general knowledge of law, the general knowledge of property law and marriage law that a generalist lawyer has would probably be sufficient. So what we tend to do in these cases is we tend to go to a generalist lawyer and count on them to say, oh, well, wait a minute, this challenge is one that I haven't faced before. I'm going to need to call in some external help on this, or they may be so involved that they just say, hey, you know what? You'd be better off to just let the specialist handle this and not pay us both. So it's valuable to create a specialty in some fields, and it's valuable to go very deep into that specialty in some fields. And that is really what Cal kind of talks about. He helps you define some of those career progressions. So if you're a CPA and you want to specialize in tax, then you need to understand the tax law. And presumably there's a career process where you identify where tax lawyers are most needed, an area or a community online where tax specialty is really needed. And so you identify that and you go there, and because of the specialty, you're able to charge this higher rate for that specialized knowledge. And so again, this is where a technical specialty and career management begin to overlap. But what they have is a plan. Now, I'm sure you hear me hedging about the value of this kind of knowledge. And again, I'll go back to the plan. If you have a plan and it involves, a career move, then or a career progression or a career specialization that you can easily identify, then that's really what Cal is talking about in a lot of ways. But the key is to have that plan. I think that in some areas, in some professions, I'll say in some work specialties, we, for lack of options, we automatically get into pursuing that depth. And we think, well, it's going to be useful to us. But it may not be necessary. Deep new knowledge puts us into these edge cases. And by an edge case, I mean this rare situation. And if we spend all of our career improvement time on getting more and more knowledge about these rarer and rarer cases without a clear path to specialization or a career framework that supports that specialization, then we may be wasting our time. And again, I think we might be doing that because most people, even now, I would say most people think just in terms of those two levels of career knowledge. And they think, well, I've got to improve my career. So they go to one or the other. They go to greater typing speed, which I think is a great thing, regardless of who you are, but it's just an example. They work on their typing when in fact they should be working on one of the two higher levels. They should be working on their career management, or they should be working on what I'll identify as work management. If you're thinking about your career specialty, it's a little bit easier to fall into that trap because these are not generalizable skills. You become a programmer, and then you start studying recursive algorithms, and this is technical stuff, but anyway, recursive algorithms show up one time out of 1,000, but you know how to do it. Well, that's great. You invested all this time to learn how to do it, but then you might bump into it twice in your career. And that can be a waste of time. And again, I'm afraid that we waste that time out of lack of options, which is why it's better to understand that there's not just two levels of career knowledge, not just two areas, but there's four areas. And the two that are less well known may in fact be the most powerful. So to catch us up here, we've talked about two of what's going to become four areas of knowledge. We talked about work skills, which is exactly what you think. Using the computer, talking to people, dressing appropriately, these kinds of things that are pretty easy to understand and fairly well known. We talked about base career skills, and these are the skills that have to do with distinguishing a programmer from a CPA and what skills you might need. And these skills may typically be learned at college, where you declare your specialty and then they teach you a lot about that specialty. And then you use that specialty to go and search for jobs in the workplace and to qualify for jobs in the workplace. So those are the two that I think everybody understands pretty well. So we'll talk about what's becoming this third area, and that's based on this post from Cal that I referred to a few minutes ago. And we see him talking about what I call career skills and career planning. Cal's got a program where he'll walk you through this. It's probably very good if you're in a corporate environment and are competing for the next open slot in promotion. That's probably a good way to go. Cal makes the point that I alluded to a minute ago. It's easy to think that in order to progress in your field, that you need more technical knowledge, more of what we call career skills. And he really makes the case that beyond a certain kind of threshold level, it's very difficult to discern the skills that make you better in your field. There are lots of fields that have these well-trod specializations, and we talked about a few of them. But in a less structured field, this guidance might not be readily available. Cal is an academic, and he understands academic career progression, and those are often the metaphors that he uses. And that's this semi-structured area in which we try to make progress. So we know that we need to, well, publish, but if we publish, where do we publish? How do we publish? How do we get better at publishing these academic articles? He's done work that's really impressive. He's got a job that's impressive. He's just an all-around impressive guy. So I love the work that he does. So his credentials are solid. As we think about these career skills, he wants to be really careful that we don't just take the greater technical skill route. And I think I've talked about that sufficiently to cover how he warns us and where the traps are there. In some of these less structured areas, Cal counsels us to take a look at successful people in the field and see what skills to actually acquire, what to actually study, to identify, and this is hard work, but to identify the skill set that they've acquired to make them successful. If it's a technical skill set like in medicine, that's fine. But in a lot of areas, it's not that clear cut. And I'll talk about a couple of examples of that just to make sure we understand where we're going here. Being a writer as a career comes to mind as an example of this less well-structured path. Maybe imagine you're a writer that writes articles for publication. What we once called a magazine writer. And you write these relatively short articles. Career progression is probably getting into better and better and better publications as compared to just writing more and more and more. In other words, if you're able to write for your local paper, then career progression probably means that you want to write for a bigger paper, not just another paper in a similar sized market as yours. But if that's true, if you're this magazine writer and you want to get an article in New Yorker Magazine, how do you go about doing that? Should you improve your technical skills? Just improve your writing, become a better writer? Or are there other skills that you need to think about? Marketing and self-promotion come to mind if you want to go from publishing in your local paper to publishing in the New Yorker. So marketing and self-promotion are not what we think of as writing skills. They involve writing. There's a lot more knowledge about that. So he wants us to think about what are the skills that are required in order to get picked up by, say, the New Yorker magazine, or if you're in the business world, get picked up by Harvard Business Review. And Cal's point is that turning into Dickens or Thoreau or Hemingway may not be the best way to get into New Yorker magazine. It may be, I don't know that field. But Cal wants us to develop these career skills and to talk to people who have done what we're trying to do. And he's got some structure for how to talk to them. Another example, if you're a professional solo athlete, say a tennis player or a golfer, your career management is really, in some ways, in your own hands. There's not a corporate path for you to follow from winning your state tournament to winning Wimbledon, like there may be in your organization, in your company, from going from entry level up to the C-suite. There may be a fairly well-defined path to do that. So if you're a professional solo athlete, then it's how do I qualify for a major tennis tournament and these really large purses? How do I qualify for Wimbledon? I would guess that every tennis player with aspirations of being a professional would like to play in Wimbledon. And it becomes this question of, okay, what is it that I need to do in order to get there? Well, from one perspective, it's pretty simple because all you got to do is win. So if you win all your matches, this thing happens sort of by its own nature. You get better and better opportunities. You get points and money and things, and you kind of climb up the ladder. But Cal wants us to think more strategically about those career areas. So if all I need to do is win, well, that's one thing. But how can I make better, faster progress through this career path? As an example, do I need to try to figure out a way to play Novak Djokovic? Or if I'm the number 300 player in the world, do I need to figure out a way to play the number 200 player in the world? Which is the better way to progress? Cal counsels us to interview successful people, and he's got some tactics for that interview. We don't go in and ask them these generic open-ended questions because you'll get generic open-ended advice. And here's the scenario, hey, Ms. Successful person, how did you become successful? Well, I worked hard. Okay, that's not terribly useful. I don't exactly know what that means. I think that I'm working hard. Does that mean I need to put in more hours, or does it mean I need to think more deeply, or what does it mean? So Cal gives us this structure coaching on this front that I really recommend if you're interested. So you can find Cal, he's not hard. That's the third piece, and trying to think through, okay, what does this career management area actually mean and what does it do? So we now understand that. So now we've got 3 out of the 4. We've got work skills. We've gone into some detail on that. We've got what I refer to as career skills, and that's this base level of knowledge about your specialty or your industry. With Cal, we've added in this career management piece where we acquire knowledge on how to move through our career effectively and hopefully quickly. And just to nail this home, I'll give a further example of what Cal talks about when he talks about career management systems. And I'll use myself as an example. I own my own business and I would like for my business to grow, but I don't really know the steps for doing that. I have a business education, so I can imagine some things. Well, if your business is going to grow, you need new customers. I appreciate that thought, and it's absolutely correct. But it leaves me a little bit cold in the sense of how do I go about doing it? How do I go about getting new customers? And so just to illustrate, what Cal would recommend is that I go find other successful business people in my area. Maybe there are other people who are consultants, coaches, people who are trying to be thought leaders in a field. And so I can go to them and ask them, okay, walk me through in detail what you did to get to where you are now. What skills, what specific skills do you think in retrospect were useful as you were able to walk this successful journey? Now, I do have coaching from people who have done what I'm trying to do, and I'll listen to them very closely. But Cal's point is that you have to go seek out this knowledge. It's not handed to you. So when I talk to the people who have successfully done what I'm trying to do based on Cal's coaching, I try to be very specific about what they've done to achieve what they've achieved. That's just an example of Cal's career management system. So I'm looking to my coaches for this career management advice. So we've covered the first three. We've covered work skills, and career management. Now we'll talk about the fourth, and it's this notion of work management. This is my own specialty, and there are a handful of other people that talk about this same idea. I want to make the parallel here because work management is to work skill as career management is to career skill. For some period of time now, we've been in and we're beginning to recognize, all of us are beginning to recognize that we're in a space, well, if you're a knowledge worker, you're in a space where your boss probably can't tell you how to be a better knowledge worker. They can try. And here we're talking about things like task and attention management, which is really where I devote my time. When we look at work management, the questions that we're trying to answer with a work management process are questions like, how do I get better at doing the things I know need to be done? Not technically better, but generally better. How do I distinguish between whether it's time to, say, process emails or whether it's time to engage in some deeper work like recording a podcast? Another question is, how do I plan my days so that the tasks that wind up getting done are the more valuable tasks, that the most valuable things in my world are going to have this higher probability of getting done? Another, do I need to put in more time acquiring a new skill set? Or do I need to give that to somebody else? Do I need to pay other people for their knowledge, or do I need to do it on my own? When we look at ways to answer these questions, I think it's fair to say that not everybody understands how we go about deriving better answers to questions in these areas. And that's largely what I do. I try to help us think through and begin to understand answers to these questions and systems that keep us on track as we address these questions, as we work through these questions about our work. I think it's abundantly clear that not everybody understands how we go about getting better in areas that help us answer those questions. And that's largely what I do. I help us think through and begin to understand, what do I need to do about this work task that I've identified? I know I need to do it, but I also know I need to do 6 other things. So how do I make the best progress through this entire batch of work? How do I make more efficient timelines? How do I know which tasks are truly important versus, let's say, less important in the current situation? How do I not lose track of commitments? I know I can't do everything at once, but if I've made a commitment and I need to focus on a different commitment, how do I store the first one so that I'll see it again, so that it will remind me that I need to do it? How do I manage my work tasks? And I coach that it's focusing on your attention rather than your time, but we'll get to all that in detail later. And these ideas bleed over into how to gain more skills. I hear you out there. Hey, Larry, I want to gain more technical skill in my area, and I have decided specifically what technical skill I need to acquire. And then the question becomes, okay, how do I find the attention/time to pursue that knowledge, to pursue learning that information? I'm already as busy as I can handle, and this is going to be additional work that's going to show up on my list. Well, a good work management system should help you prioritize those ideas. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go forward. So just in case you think this is a little weird, developing work management systems, that is not an entirely new idea. A very recent time that we did it that's pretty well known is the development of project management. So when we think about project management, I'll explain this example so that you can see that it is in fact a work management system. And in case you don't know what project management is, project management theory came out of work that the Air Force and NASA were doing. One of the prominent heydays of project management was around the Apollo missions and the space program in the 60s and 70s. So the notion of project management really kind of came to life at that point. The definition of a project is a one-time large effort to do something that really has never been done before, and that's the textbook definition. The field of project management is the attempt to develop a tool set, a way of thinking that helps you manage that large effort. So practically, we're thinking about creating and launching an Apollo rocket, and that's where we develop this thinking. You got a ton of different people, different companies, different groups of companies that are all working on things, working on different components. But in seeking efficiency, we want efforts to go along on parallel courses. And so that this information can be exchanged and we get better results from each interdependent team. So these groups need to help each other out. They need to talk to each other about what they're building and what they've discovered and the limits of their engineering. The second problem that we have in project management is this resource utilization question. We've got a budget for X number of people. So how do we best spend those dollars and utilize those people, given that there are interdependencies between their work, interdependencies between their results? Project management was designed to resolve these problems, or at least make these problems noticeable so that a human could resolve them. And the reason this is important, and I've spent a little time here, the reason this is important is because project management is a work management system. It helps us decide about our work. It helps us to decide when to do work. It helps us to decide who should do work. It helps us to understand when our work may be done. It helps us to decide which tasks need to come first and which tasks are okay to be done second. So the point of all this is not to give you some deep education in project management, but to illustrate the fact that project management as a field is this work management system. Just so you'll know, project management is also applicable to smaller projects than the Apollo program. We utilized it in managing programming efforts, and helping us structure our work so that we could set goals and attempt to meet them. So that we could say, okay, well, it looks like we're not going to meet this goal. What do we do about it? And that's really important, because if we're off track and we know we're off track, then there may be something we can do about that. If we're not on track but don't know it, then there's no reason for us to change any course or make any decision. We'll just keep going, but we're now on a path that's not going to help us meet our target. And this is an important feature of work management systems. My point here is to illustrate that people do, in fact, work on work management systems. Project management is probably not what you need for your own situation. It may be. If it is, you know that, and you're trying to learn this. The PMI is a huge organization. They do certifications and they try to extend knowledge about how projects are done. So they developed a work management system and they continue to try to make it better or to expand it. You may know that they faced a challenge over about the last 15 years or so. And the challenge is that there's another school of thought. There's another work management system. It's called Agile Project Management. You may have heard terms like Agile Management or Scrum, which is a particular flavor of Agile Management. And those work management systems have been developed to recognize some of the flaws in the project management methodology. As you can imagine, there's huge debate over what the flaws are and whether there are any, but that's how we get better at things, is identifying flaws and developing new systems to try to fix them. So now we've talked about two different work management systems, or at least two flavors of a work management system that attempts to solve a specific problem, which is, how do we efficiently do something that we've never done before? So it's not weird or unusual that we should be doing work management thinking and work management effort. When I say Cal's trying to move from one field to another, what I mean is that entrepreneurs and business people have long sought consulting and coaching on how to grow their business. But I think Cal's point is that given that we're in the world of knowledge work and there's an increasingly high probability that you're a knowledge worker, he wants to help you understand that now you need to engage in this career management thinking. So similarly, I think because you're a knowledge worker, because of the gig economy, because of the modern workplace, that you should invest in developing a work management system for yourself. The goal of a work management system is to help you understand what needs to be done now, because you can't do everything now. It's up to you to understand, if you make a decision to postpone a piece of work, how do you track that decision as compared to just losing track of the task and forgetting about it? Because you're a knowledge worker, you may not have a boss or another system for managing your work. And that's what I do, and that's how Attention Compass can help you. But in both cases, Cal and I, in both cases, we want to show you the benefit of behaving more like a solo business person. In Cal's case, you learn how to create a strategy for yourself, just like a business would. And he wants you to know that your organization and boss are now much likely to manage your career strategy and progression. In my case, you learn how to direct and manage yourself just like a solo business person would. I also want you to know that your organization and boss are now much less likely to manage you as well as you could manage yourself, once you know that you need to and have the skills to do so. If you find that instead of acquiring more technical knowledge, you need to attack a specific kind of project, and that's what will move your career forward, maybe you need to demonstrate experience in developing marketing plans. Or to take a business example, it may be that in your career, the next best step for career progression is for you to go back to school and get an MBA. Well, what we want to think about here is that that's another task. That's another chunk of work that you're going to have to accommodate. Consider figuring out what a successful person would advise you to do in order to progress in your career. It's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to identify the individual. You're going to have to figure out who in your network can do an introduction, or you're going to have to reach out and cold call this person in order to get on their calendar and actually acquire the advice through conversation. So again, we'll use the writer example. If you want to be a better writer, then I suggest you arrange a meeting with Malcolm Gladwell. Well, you say, okay, I don't know how to do that. I don't have time to figure it out. I'm too busy with my day-to-day with keeping the job that I've got and keeping the family fed, that I don't have the additional time to do the work that's involved in understanding this new career trajectory and finding out what I need to do moving along. So you can identify things that need to be done in order for you to progress in your career, but actually doing them is another skill set. And that's why I consider it a fourth area of work and career and, well, income management. That's the space where Attention Compass shows up and really shines. How do we organize the work? How do we get more effective in our day-to-day such that time becomes available for some of these broader questions? How do we remember that in order to meet Malcolm Gladwell, we're going to have to go to this writers conference, which is once a year? How do I make time for that? How do I find the budget to pay for that writers conference? And so we get out into these broader areas and questions of work management. And again, that's this fourth area. I'll have more to say about getting better at this work management skill, but just to make sure that we're situated and everybody understands where we've gotten to, we've identified 4 areas in which you probably want to do some work. The 2 that everybody knows about are getting good at workplace skills. Again, this is this computer use and different applications and that sort of thing. And then there's technical knowledge in your specialty. So these are the 2 that everybody knows about and everybody pursues. You probably know about them and pursue them. You may be spending less time on the work skills and more time on the career skills, however that's working out in your life. But then there are the two that are less well known, and one is this career management idea that Cal Newport is so strong on. And then there are probably other people to talk to about this, but he's the one that I'm aware of. And I have such deep respect for his knowledge and work there. So that's the third, is this career management skill set. Then the fourth is this work management skill set. And we've described what that is to some degree. What I want you to know is that there are principles of work management, and that's really the extension of work skills. Being a great typist is a great thing, but it really, in and of itself, doesn't have a lot to say about what you should be typing. It doesn't have a lot to say about whether you should be transcribing your own thoughts or transcribing someone else's thoughts. And so that then fades over into this work management skill set. My own work management process, and the process that I would love to teach everybody, is called the attention compass. It's a personal, individual work management system. It's intended primarily for people who don't have a boss, so to speak. It's intended for people who have to figure out their own work and have to manage their own work versus having somebody, at least nominally, who tells you what you should be doing. Now, just because you have a boss doesn't mean that you don't need to be doing this work. And that's what I've tried to explain with the rise of knowledge work and the rise of the gig economy. So thinking back to kind of your organization, if you went back to Henry Ford and Frederick Taylor days, if you worked in one of Henry Ford's factories, he or one of his assistants would literally tell you what to do every day. They would say, do this, don't do that. Here's the thing, do the stuff. Now, with knowledge work, it challenges this notion. The fact that a lot of us now are knowledge workers and our numbers are growing as a percentage of the workforce really challenges this idea that your boss can and will tell you what to do in terms of managing your task level work. And part of the reason is because if you're an expert knowledge worker, if you're an expert in your field of knowledge work, it's difficult for a non-expert to really organize your day-to-day work. If you're an academic, for example, and you're a specialist in your field of knowledge, it's very difficult for anybody to come in and say, you shouldn't be doing experiment A right now, you should be doing experiment B. Only the knowledge worker, the academic, him or herself, they're the only person who really has enough expertise in this field to say, no, wait a minute, I need to be doing research project B right now rather than research project A. And so the bigger point here is that the modern economy is pushing us into areas of knowledge work. And then, as I mentioned, there's the gig economy where people are moving into consulting roles. And basically, they're starting their own business in their specialty. And then a lot of them get hired by their former employer. People want more control over their work. Maybe they want to take on other customers, that is, other than their current employer. If you're an employee, you're in business, but your customer list is very short. You have one customer. The gig economy then is people attempting to reach out and have more customers, maybe as a diversification play. So both these forces, rise of knowledge work and the gig economy, interact and support each other to some degree. Putting them together, it's simply true that it's becoming less and less common for you to show up at your work and for your boss to really be able to say, hey, this stack, this is your work. But at the end of the day, you don't tell your doctor how to diagnose your situation. The doctor is the expert. And if you try to tell the doctor how to diagnose your ailment, then you're probably making your doctor less effective than if you don't try to tell them, because they understand their own specialty better than you do. And if they don't, then you probably need another doctor. That's the relationship and motivation for developing and adopting a work management system. Because if you're a realtor, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're any kind of solo professional, then you don't have a boss. Thus, nobody's really motivated to even try and tell you what to do. Your customers don't know how to tell you what to do. They know they like this house, if you're a realtor, better than that one, but they don't know how to go about telling you how to help them acquire that house. To finalize and reinforce our thinking, let's recap here. We see that there are 4 areas of work knowledge: work skill, career skill, work management, and career management. As I've said, work skill and career skill are fairly well known and pretty easily identified. Somebody may lack knowledge in either one of these areas, but this lack is fairly easy to identify. Your boss or your profession will tell you. And ways to fill knowledge gaps in this career skill area are fairly well known. So you take courses, college courses, and different kind of training programs to fill those gaps. Also, these two have been with us for a long time. We've generally needed to arrive at our job with work skills. That is, we know how to show up on time, we communicate, not lazy, those sorts of things. And we qualify for consideration for a specific job by having career skills that fit that job. Knowledge of your field. Maybe you gained this through college courses, maybe you've gained it through experience. The next point is that the work environment and culture, work culture, are in the middle of a significant change. The rise of knowledge work and the increasing desire for independence that we see in the gig economy puts us in a position where our boss and our company might not help us with work management and or career management. The extension of career skill, as Cal Newport identified, is career management. This is understanding the need to manage your own career. This is developing ways to understand how somebody advances, perhaps largely outside of a corporate structure. Similarly, the extension of work skill, as I've tried to identify here, is work management. So this is developing ways to decide on and effectively execute our own work. So we decide which tasks we need to do. We make priority decisions. We make time trade-offs, do this or that. We manage the backlog of tasks so that we don't forget our commitments, all of these sorts of things. And that work management includes tasks generated in any of the other 3 areas. If you identify a career skill that's missing, that gives you a task. Implementing your own attention compass is a great way to get more effective at managing your own work. So it's kind of hard to say which of the 4 areas is the most important, but I'll make the case for work management as being the most important. Duh, right? But it's true, because if we can't accurately identify our important work, if we can't execute it, and we can't grow our capacity to deliver, it's going to be difficult to keep a job, much less thrive in it. It's going to be difficult to have the space to go and do these outside projects that really are simply for your own benefit, not necessarily for the benefit of your organization. Of course, you could say the same thing for work skills and career skills. And I would say that the primary difference is that improving our work skills, career skills, or even career management requires us to do these additional tasks. So if we're not managing our current work well enough to have some margin to engage in this additional work, it's hard to see how we could complete it. Nevertheless, regardless of which one is more important or more fundamental, however you want to say that, with knowledge of these 4 areas, you're now in a better position to make decisions and grow in your own productivity, to grow in your own career, to grow in your own success, and to lead a better work life. So I'll leave it there for now. This is Larry Tribble, Ph.D. Thanks for taking some time to improve your task and information management on the Do Busy Right podcast. The show is dedicated to helping you think about how to get better at working. And we do this by improving your attention and your focus. I believe that your work is not just about your job, but about all the tasks that you do to turn yourself, your environment, and your relationships into what you want them to be. What we're really talking about here is the underpinnings of becoming who you want to be. The primary way I help people is through coaching the attention compass process. Attention encompasses 4 workflows and a tool set that support our information, task, and attention management. I help people with big goals to build habits that put them in a position to achieve. We do this by eliminating wasted time and wasted attention. If you'd like to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn or go to dobusywrite.com for more information. Have a good week, more effective and less exhausted. Do busy right.